And it looks good. Yep, I can hear it fine. Good.
Yep.
So,
okay, good.
Yeah. So, hello guys, welcome to episode 57 of the Switch Indie Fix podcast, a podcast dedicated to everything indie on the Nintendo Switch. I, as always, am your host, Adam, and today I am joined by a very special guest. It's been a long time kind of in the works that we got him on the podcast, but finally we've snapped him up today, and that is John Reviews Switch, aka Gaming in the Wild. John, how are
Hello.
you this Tuesday afternoon?
I'm all right, thank you. Miserable day in Iceland. It's like the summer has ended. It's been grey for 3 days now, but it's a good excuse to just play a bunch of games instead of doing proper stuff.
And what is a summer in Iceland like? Like how long does it last? Because I guess everyone thinks that it's always mega cold there.
Where we have May, June, July, and there's actually some sun, and then everything else is either grey or completely shit.
Sounds like you got like autumn to look forward to. Then at least you'll get in a lot of gaming.
Exactly. How about you? How you doing?
Yeah, also doing good. Been busy today. That's why people in the Twitch chat might see that your gamer tag under your name doesn't look quite the same as mine because I didn't have time to update. I'll make like a graphic for you, but I've just done the best as I can. And yeah, the podcast, the format's probably going to be a little bit different today. Like I said, I just really wanted to get an episode out because we haven't recorded one for like 2 months, just over summer. Because over summer everyone's busy because the weather's nice and you can go outside. And obviously, like we've kind of like left lockdown now, so it's not really so much of a restriction here anymore. But yeah, so I just really wanted to get an episode out to people. And hopefully people enjoy it. And yeah, so we invited John on first to talk about this week's indie game news, and secondly to talk about some of the best chilled out indie games on the Nintendo Switch. What games are we going to be talking about today, John?
Well, the last indie direct that came up was amazing for me because I've actually been waiting for a Short Hike and Manifold Garden for Switch for absolutely ages. So much so that I actually signed up for Apple Arcades just to play Manifold Garden. And I played a Short Hike on the Epic Game Store and I signed up just to play that as well. So when they both landed on Switch, I was really happy to see them because they're two real quality titles that I've been waiting for. Love to play them on handhelds. What else have we got? Also, I've just played Road to Guangdong, brand new 2020 indie game about a road trip through China. It's kind of a basic driving game mixed with a visual novel format, but it's quite original and a really decent game.
Yeah, and I thought we could also maybe talk a little bit about Takeshi and Hiroshi because I think we've both played that.
Yeah, I sat and played that one in one sitting the other night. Yeah, really enjoyed it. And today I've been playing a bit of Spinch.
Ah, really? Ah, cool.
Yeah, I got in touch with the fella who does works with that studio, and he shot me over a code for the podcast. And it's the kind of game that I can imagine you playing on Twitch. Actually, it's super fast, super fun, super kind of arcadey, really colourful, like super stimulating. If you know what I mean, it's all action all the time.
Like psychedelic, really, doesn't it? Like
yeah, loads of colour,
the art style,
decent music, and the gameplay is fast and furious. It's like, you know what it reminds me of? You know the bit in Hollow Knight when you've actually managed to power your guy up so he can double jump, he can grip the walls, you've got the mantis claws, you've run the gauntlet of hellish gameplay. But in Spinch, you just start off with all that stuff. So you just feel really mobile and really kind of, it's really playable.
Yeah, cool. Good, so we will talk about these games in our second portion of the podcast. But first, as always, we will start with this week's gaming news. And on this week's list, there are, I would say, about 5 main stories. And then a few new games of note. And 5 game stories is half a baker's dozen, which is kind of like the meme we always say on the show, John. And starting off, which is quite a big one, is that Rocket League is no longer Rocket League will drop Switch Online requirement when it goes free to play. So these stories, usually when I do the podcast, I always rewrite the stories myself. Today I'm just reading them off. This one is from Liam Doolan from Nintendo Life, so I'm just going to read the story straight out. So a few months ago, Psyonix surprised everyone when it announced its popular soccer game Rocket League would be going free to play later this year. When it is finally made available to everyone, as you might have guessed, it will no longer require users to be signed up to the Nintendo Switch Online to join matches on the internet. This covers both the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4 versions of the game. And here's a full confirmation, which came from the Rocket League website, which basically just says PlayStation Plus members and Nintendo Switch Online members will no longer be required for online play on these platforms. So this is kind of like a big story because it basically means that you can play online, or at least you can play Rocket League online for free, which is very cool because obviously this game is going free to play, as it said. So it wants to have as little or as few barriers in the way of people playing it as possible. So if you put the game on for free and then say, yeah, well, you have to have a $20 a year subscription to the online, otherwise you can't play it. It kind of doesn't really make sense. But I think it's very interesting that Psionic, I guess, has gotten big enough now that it can kind of push its weight around a little bit, just like Fortnite, because it's the same kind of concept with Fortnite, that even if you're not signed up to Nintendo Switch Online, you can play Fortnite anywhere online with other players. Yeah, and I wonder if any other games are going to kind of follow suit after this.
Right. I mean, I think it's especially good if they're looking at younger players who are maybe not signing up for these £20 online memberships and stuff. It kind of broadens out the people that can join in with Rocket League. And if they're all about just building up the esports brand and kind of, getting as many people into the game as possible, it's a smart move.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's... Yeah, I guess I never really thought about that because you always think of gamers being like, our generation and around our age. But I guess that's right. If like a young kid is playing it, it is very easy to play, like easy to understand. Like it's really just football, and you're playing it with cars. But then it kind of like begs to differ why we need a Nintendo Switch Online. Like, what is your kind of like conclusion of Nintendo Switch Online, John? What do you think of it?
Well, I got it straight away when I got my Switch last year, specifically to play Mario Kart with my buddies.
Yeah.
But I've probably used it about 5 times. I have to say, like the Super Nintendo suite of games is quite an offering.
Yeah.
Especially if you're, retro gaming is a hobby that a lot of people have, but you need you're going to run a SNES, you need an old telly. You need to have a proper dedicated retro game setup. And as like a first wave player, I played like Mario World and Super Metroid and Super Mario All-Stars when they first came out. But I'm not the kind of guy that's going to build a retro game setup. So I'm actually really pleased to have those games. But the conversation around backwards compatibility is always like people think they want it, but then hardly anyone uses it when the console manufacturers put it in.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the Super Nintendo aspect. I've had a few good games on there, some kind of sentimental titles like Pop and Twinbee. I was really happy to see that come on there.
Yeah.
So I think I'll stay on it. It's good for the occasional Mario Kart game, and I enjoy the Super Nintendo suite, especially if they're going to add Nintendo 64 at some point. That would be a big selling point for people.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of sweetened by the price as well. It's not like PS4 and Xbox where it's like 60 or 70 pounds a year. Like the 20 euros or the £20 for most people is manageable enough where you think, okay, like for me, I really like the cloud saves because I have 2 Switches, so there's oftentimes where I'm switching between them, and I might need to upload a save or download a save, which is really reassuring. Or that if you lose your Switch, that all of your saves or most of your saves are backed up. Ironically, I guess there's a lot of Nintendo first party games that don't support cloud saves. But I think it's
the only one that I'd really care about is Breath of the Wild. I think I'd be devastated to lose my Breath of the Wild save. 260 hours of progress.
Yeah, that's it. The one for me would be Animal Crossing, but I still don't think you can back it up now because they're so scared of people duplicating items in there.
Yeah, come on, Nintendo, give people a break.
Yeah,
let them upload
exactly.
their items.
But no, I think it's very cool that this is happening. I'm glad it's Rocket League. That is, I feel like it's always kind of goes in like a hierarchy of Call of Duty does something first usually, or Fortnite, and then close behind is Rocket League, and then Warframe, and then these other kind of big indie world online games. So it's cool that they're doing it. It's also kind of like I said, it kind of makes me question why Nintendo has an online service when you don't necessarily need to pay for it to access it online. But yeah, but I'm interested to see what people in the chat think and what people listening think at home about that. So the next story is kind of like a happy, sad story, and that is Nuclear Throne studio Flam is closing its doors after 10 years. So this was announced last week on Twitter by Rami Ismail and Jan Willem Niegemann. They issued a statement on Twitter and kind of had like a thread that they said, "We had a beautiful run, made incredible games and worked with amazing people, but it is time for a new thing. It's not a sad day for us, but the happy conclusion to a whirlwind decade filled with screen shake. It feels like we've achieved what we set out to do as a studio, as a voice, and as individuals, and we are extremely grateful for the past years." And you'll probably know Flambear from Nuclear Throne is probably the most famous game that they have. Also then Super Crate Box and Lufttrousers. And yeah, it's kind of like a sad story because it's Flambear are one of the, I'd say, the most iconic indie game studios from that kind of era between 2012 and maybe 2016, where indie games were really starting to just become popular, very mainstreamly popular. And I guess that was kind of summarized with Nuclear Throne and how well that did, very briefly. And also, I guess from our side, if ever from reviewer side, we have a lot to thank Rami Ismail for, because he's the guy who created the press kit add-on to websites. So whenever we're looking for information on a game or for an email address, you can use basically his template that helps us find developers. So yeah, it's kind of a sad story, but I'm interested to see what they're both going to go on and do in the future. I imagine they're both going to set up their own new studios and work towards something else. And yeah, just to mention that the developer is keen to point out that it will be looking into ways it can offer ongoing support for its earlier titles, and it should be noted that it's not quite lights out yet. Ultra Bugs, Flambear's next game, is still in active development. So yeah, yeah. Do you have any history with playing any of their games, John?
I haven't played their games, but it's always sad to hear that an indie studio is shuttering up. There's a general conversation around the viability of indie studios that's ongoing. There's been a lot of times that people have predicted a kind of indie studio apocalypse, but it hasn't come. It seems slightly opposite is true, that a lot of studios are flourishing, but yeah. Sad to hear that this one has had to take this step. Yeah,
me too. But yeah, I wish them both good luck. And for the listeners at home, let us know what games you enjoy playing from Flambear. Say the most popular one I think is definitely Nuclear Throne, which I played years ago back on Steam, I think. But yeah.
What kind of game is that one?
It's basically Enter the Gungeon before Enter the Gungeon.
Okay, so it's your type of thing.
Exactly, yeah. It's it's kind of like the bridge between The Binding of Isaac and Enter the Gungeon. And when it came out for me, it was a little bit too rough around the edges. The art style I didn't really like. But if you saw it, you would think this is probably a beta Enter the Gungeon, or an alpha version of Enter the Gungeon, because it's a twin stick shooter, top down, very pixelated. You have these very unique looking characters. And it's kind of like I said, for a while it was really popular, and then it kind of died off as Enter the Gungeon came out and kind of stole its thunder.
Right, so it's a kind of formative, influential indie game that's kind of
definitely
past its time a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. It had its kind of flash in the pan, and then I think it inspired alongside Enter the Gungeon. Alongside The Binding of Isaac, it kind of inspired Enter the Gungeon, and that kind of stole its thunder.
Well, I would say that if the studios managed to come up with one game that managed to set a trend, the positive to take from it is that ideas are a renewable resource, and if those guys are, the kind of creative guys that'll come up with an idea like that, I'm sure there's more to come from them.
Yeah, I'm sure too. Yeah. So the next story is also kind of it's, I guess, I don't know if it's a news story in itself. I just thought it was interesting because it relates to a game that I'm really excited for, and it is that Baldur's release date has changed from this summer to be decided. And again, this comes from Liam Doolan at Nintendo Life. And he says, the last time we got an update on the upcoming timed Switch exclusive Baldur was earlier this year in March, which I believe was another Indie World presentation it was part of. The action-adventure RPG was meant to be arriving in summer 2020. Well, it seems a release date for the game on the official Nintendo website has now been updated, and it has a lot of Switch fans thinking it might have been delayed. Instead of this year, it is now listed as to be decided, or TBD. The name of the title also appears to have been lengthened to Baldur the Guardian Owls. Nap's team, the developer behind the game, hasn't actually said anything about a delay yet, but I guess they are a very small studio from Italy, and obviously because of the coronavirus, I imagine that they have been affected probably quite heavily with it, with having to work from home. And yeah, it's one of those games where it kind of got announced on this Indie World presentation and then kind of blew up. So I think it might also be the fact that maybe they also want a bit more time just to pad out the game a little bit more and maybe make it more of what people wanted it to be. Like, do you know the game at all, John?
I don't. I like the look of it from the little bit that I've seen.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, Baldur is like an RPG that is set. It looks like it's set in the world of a Studio Ghibli movie. So the art style is very Ghibli-esque. It's very colorful, and the characters have like very like rounded faces and big eyes, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. And I think that's why so many people were drawn to it after the Indie World presentation back in March. But I think in the studio there's only like 2 or 3 people working on it. So
right.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of like tempering expectations to what the game is actually going to be. Obviously, it has a gorgeous art style, and it says it's an RPG, but I don't think it's going to be like 100 or 200 hour long RPG from such a small studio. And yeah, the studio hasn't confirmed that it's delayed, but I think it's kind of obvious that if they're changing the expected release date on the website, on the Nintendo website, then it probably has been. And because of the situation of the world, then, fair enough if that's the reason why.
Yeah, it looks like a really intriguing one. And I mean, everyone knows the cautionary tale of No Man's Sky when a little indie game became like a big talked about title. So if they need a bit more time to get it right, then it's always the right decision.
Exactly. Yeah. Good. And the next 2 are actually just updates to previously released indie games. The first one is The Curious Expedition, which is a roguelike adventure game. It's how to describe it. And you might know it if you watch the Gamescom opening ceremony thing with Jeff Keighley, because Curious Expedition 2 won one of the awards there that they were doing with IGN for best looking indie game. And it's like it's basically a game where you're traveling across a map, and as you travel across the map, you're moving on kind of hexagonal tiles, a bit like Civilization. And then there are random events that happen as you're moving along this map. And that's kind of the roguelikeness to it. Every time you start a new expedition, the events change, the map changes. But yeah, the first one is already out on Switch. I think it came out earlier this year. And it has had a new update, which primarily deals with a few bugs. And below are the official patch notes. So the first one is that the gold pyramid may remain buried after the player activates all seals. The party is spawning outside of the map after using teleport. The screen goes black if the player uses the D-pad down button after selecting the top die. And text when completing the game is missing. So yeah, if you are playing the game or you have been playing the game, because I know it is quite popular, there are some fixes there for you, which will hopefully make your gaming experience better in the Curious Expedition. I actually think this could be a U game, John.
I like the look of it, I have to say.
Yeah, like it seems very laid back but kind of very interesting. Like I've seen like dinosaurs in it and like Indiana Jones references and like it's all set in like Victorian times, I think. So it's really like that kind of feel of the journey to the center of the earth. And all I was just going to
say that, yeah.
Yeah, and all this random stuff is happening.
Definitely. I like the look of the visuals and the atmosphere of it, and anything that says an expedition simulation. I'm definitely curious to try. I'm not a big fan of roguelikes. I kind of tend to like like a strong narrative from A to B,
Yeah.
rather than like a tight gameplay loop. But in this case, I could be up for giving it a try.
Yeah, it seems like a mash of both of those things. Like, because I think it is very, very narrative based, but trying to make it like one of those open ended, write your own or read your own. What are they called? You know, those books where it's like,
Choose your own adventure.
Choose your own adventure. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so it might be an interesting one for you.
Love the art style. Curious to see the expedition.
Yeah. Good. Then our final update before we get into new games of note is for Streets of Rage 4, which gets a massive update and reports download sales have surpassed 1.5 million copies, which is a massive number for this game. So it says Dotemu, Lizardcube, and Guard Crush Games have announced a massive new patch for Streets of Rage 4. It includes almost 80 updates, bug fixes, and balance changes to the game, all of which were tested by the community itself. And yeah, there are updates including specials and star moves can interrupt any hit stun state on guard, to faster movement speed, better recovery on air special, grand upper travels farther. So if you are into Streets of Rage 4, like they said, there's over 80 different updates. It's all on nintendoeverything.com, and the story is by Brian on there. So I just thought I'd put that in because I know a lot of the community enjoyed this game. And it's also like, I don't know, this would be a good game to stream, I think, because it has the online multiplayer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a first wave player of Streets of Rage and Golden Axe and those kind of side scrolling brawlers, but I haven't touched one since then, to be honest.
Yeah. We used to have a Mega Drive set up in my grandma's. Like my granddad used to work at like an all boys school, and it was like a boarding school, and he would bring home like old consoles sometimes, you know, when the new ones would come out, and they were like, we don't want the Mega Drive anymore because we've got, I don't know, a Dreamcast now. So one time he brought home a Mega Drive with like, I think about 20 different games, and one of them was Streets of Rage 2. And me and my brother...
Well, that's like a proper Christmas, bringing that back.
Yeah, exactly. And me and my brother used to love it, and I used to love it because one of the characters was Adam, so I was like, okay, I always have to play as Adam.
Mm-hmm.
And
have you played Streets of Rage 4?
I haven't. No, like I want to. Like I said, I think it would be a great game to stream, and like maybe co-stream with someone else because of the online multiplayer. And I really would like to play with someone else because I don't know if I'd get through the whole game by myself because I'm not much of a brawler fan. But I've only heard like really good things, and I know the cross players, Dan and Ben, played it on stream together and really liked it. So yeah,
there was a lot of noise about this game. A lot of people were very happy about it.
Yeah,
a lot of people seem very loyal to that series. Like they played the first few and they were super excited for it.
Yeah, and I think this with the fourth one, they've been very, very true to the game itself, and I think the studios that worked on it were also very much like big fans. And Ben is in the chat saying he totally carried Dan. Yeah, I totally believe that, Ben. Yeah, and I think that's why it's sold so well. 1.5 million copies just from downloads is an impressive number. And I know they've also had like a very big push on like physical games. Like I can't remember who it was, but I know there was some limited run or super rare games run that did it physically. So I'm sure they've got good sales on the physical side as well.
Yeah, it had really nice artwork, and they seemed to kind of hit that the nail on the head for the collectors.
Yeah, exactly. Good. So then we will move on to new games of note. And one that got announced about 20 minutes before we recorded was Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 Complete Edition is confirmed for the Switch, and it's out this month, which I'm very, very excited about. And again, this comes from nintendoeverything.com and is written by Brian, who I guess is the news kind of like editor because he writes all of these stories. And it says, following yesterday's leak, Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 Complete Edition has been officially announced for Switch. Frontier will release the game on September 24th, so about 2 weeks to wait, or just over 2 weeks to wait until the game comes out. Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 will now be playable in HD. The game's soaked and wild expansions are also included. Here's an overview of the game. Build the park of a lifetime and rediscover the critically acclaimed rollercoaster simulation bestseller. Feel the thrill of a genre-defining classic, complete with 2 huge expansion packs, which is reimagined for the Nintendo Switch. And it also has a campaign, career, and sandbox mode. Your park, your way. Whatever you want to create, Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 gives you the tools and the freedom to build the amusement park of your dreams. Do you have any affiliation to the Rollercoaster Tycoon or like Zoo Tycoon or any of these Tycoon games, John?
I haven't. I was looking at this news story. It reminds me, last time I played something like this was probably Theme Park.
Yeah.
But you didn't get to ride the roller coasters on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, I don't know. I think it was back on like the PS1. I went through a stage of just being addicted to like Zoo Tycoon and Rollercoaster Tycoon and Theme Park. And yeah, like I saw this and I was like, this is like, I can't wait to play it. Like it's because I always think, I feel like the Switch is missing like a lot of these games, and I think Frontier, these kind of tycoon games, and Frontier is now kind of stepping up because it's bringing this to the Switch, and then in November it's bringing the Jurassic Park Evolution game, which is also kind of like a theme park building game, but you build it with like you're building a dinosaur park, and it's kind of cool that they seem to be finally putting these games on the Switch and updating them and giving them HD. And for me, I'm really excited for Rollercoaster Tycoon, and I'm happy that we don't have to wait too long until it comes out.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of game that's probably designed with a mouse in mind.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to see what they do with the controls if they use the touch screen.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Yeah, because I think originally they were PC games, but like I said, I'm sure I remember playing it on the PS1 when I was a kid. So yeah. If you could go ahead, John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say like point and click games that are designed for mouse. I always like it when they go the extra mile with the ports and try and optimize it for Switch. Because it's a shame not to use a touch screen when you've got one. If you're pointing and clicking, you can literally reach out and touch the screen. You know.
Yeah. No, I hope they do that too. Especially like because I play mostly on my Lite now, so it's just nice to. It's just so easy to just do it when you're there and lay back and enjoy. Good. So the next new game of note is called 9 Monkeys of Shaolin. 9 Monkeys of Shaolin, a beat-em-up action game, is slated for Switch next month, so that will be in October. And there is some early footage posted on a video on the Nintendo Everything website. It looks very cool, like it's a beat-em-up with, I guess, like you're using weapons, and the art style is, I guess, maybe cel-shaded, you would call it. Like it reminds me very much of the 13 art style from back in the day. And in the video, the guy is using martial arts to fight various people. There seems to be like a story mode in it. It kind of reminds me of, Shaq Fu, which got re-released recently. Like it's kind of like 2.5D. And yeah, the video doesn't do the best job of showing it off. Like the guy is fighting, kicking an enemy, but like doesn't look like he's doing any damage to him. The enemy is just swinging his sword, and the guy is like kicking him, and then eventually now he's finally blown up. So yeah, that might be one to look out for if you are interested in like a brawler / like hack and slash. And finally, the last game on the list is called War Tile, which is a cooldown-based strategy game, and it's also coming to it's coming to the Switch this month. Deck 13 and Playwood Project are bringing the cooldown-based strategy game War Tile to Switch, an eShop listing has revealed, and it will also be released on September 24th, which is the day that Rollercoaster Tycoon 3 comes out. War Tile is a cool-down-based strategy game in which you control a warband of Viking figurines in a miniature universe inspired by Norse mythology. Experience a living, breathing tabletop video game that invites the player into a miniature universe full of smart adventures set in beautifully handcrafted diorama battle boards inspired by Norse mythology to honor the Vikings. That was all one sentence. Wow. Yeah, so it's a turn-based cooldown. I don't necessarily know what that means. Like, I guess.
I think that's like where you have to kind of move and then you get a little ticker, right? So it's like 5 seconds until you can do something else. So it's like almost like a kind of a live action element rather than pure turn based.
Yeah, because it goes on in the press release that you can then freeze time and then, I guess, strategically move or choose where you're going to move next. I just put it on because it looks interesting. If you are like a Warhammer fan or you enjoy playing tabletop games, but don't want to actually have to get a table out and put all your figurines on the table, it might be a game for you. Because the art style looks really nice. Obviously, if you're also into Nordic kind of what's it called, Nordic folklore and mythology, then this might also be one to watch out for.
Yeah, it seems like there's quite a crossover between tabletop gamers and video gamers. It's not a scene that I'm in, but I know there's a lot of people into it. I listen to a podcast called The Short Game, and those guys are really into short indies and tabletop games, so I'll pass that one along to them.
Yeah, cool.
As a recommendation.
Sounds like a cool podcast as well. Yeah, I've always been like I guess a casual war tabletop gamer. Like I really got into the painting the figurines back in university, which is just like ironic because they're so expensive to buy. And when I was at uni, I had no money, so I was like, I'm gonna buy these figurines for £40 and then buy the paint for like the next another £40, and then in the end I just never ended up painting them, so they just got all stuck under my bed. So I'm sure I've still got boxes and boxes full of stuff under my bed at home.
Yeah, I mean, I was a Warhammer gamer as a kid.
Yeah.
I had like an orc army and zombie dragons and all this stuff and painted them all. But cool. It's been a fair few. It's been two and a half decades since I picked up a little paintbrush for that.
Yeah.
But nice to see it springing into the digital gaming world.
Yeah, that's it. Good. So that has been our first portion of the show, our news section. Let us know in the chat or at home what you thought of this week's news. Like I said, I'm sorry if it was a little bit all over the place because I do have a docket prepared. This week I haven't got one because I didn't have time to write it. But nevertheless, we are going on to our conversation portion of the show, which we will be talking about these chilled indie games that John has been playing. And before we start the second portion, I would like to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by the Switch IndieFix Discord server. If you are looking for a fun and active indie game Discord server to join, then do consider joining Switch IndieFix Discord server by going to switchindiefix.com/Discord. So, John, where would you like to start? Which game do you want to talk about first?
Like I said, I was super happy with that direct. I've watched a few directs in the past and I hadn't heard of any of the titles before. And there's one thing that maybe looks appealing or something to perk your attention up. But this one was actually just kind of game after game.
Yeah.
So I got a short hike on the day of the direct.
Mm-hmm.
And I played through it that evening.
Yeah.
And it's just a joy, that game. I love it. I mean, I reviewed it for the site, obviously, and gave it a 10.
Yeah. Very good review up at switchindiefix.com. But what was it about a short hike that drew you to it before the direct? Because it was out, I believe, on the Epic Store first, and then they had a stage where it was free, right? Where if they always give a free game away every month, and that one month they had a short hike. Like, what was it? Because I seem to remember hearing about it because it was winning awards, and then I think exactly. I also picked it up on the Epic Store but never played it because I thought, okay, this is probably going to come to Switch soon. And then I also played it, I think the weekend after the presentation, and like I didn't go as in depth as you, but I played I think like 3 or 4 hours of it and really really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, as some of the listeners might know if they listen to my podcast, Gaming in the Wild, I was like an avid gamer who took a long time off because of work, and just being really busy and moving country and selling all my consoles. So I was way behind on games when I picked it up again last year. And so I've been trawling the best of lists, basically, best indie games of the decade, best games of the year, and trying to fill in the blanks. And A Short Hike was one that came up from trusted sources for me again and again as like the game of, I think it was 2017 when it first came out.
Okay.
And there was some stiff competition that year. There's a lot of good indie games that year. And so for A Short Hike to have gotten to the top of the pile for people, I was just very, very curious about it. It was spoken about in glowing terms. And so when I picked it up on the Epic Game Store, I actually couldn't get my pad to work with it, so I literally played it with arrow keys and spacebar.
Yeah.
I played it over the Christmas holidays, and I sat playing it for 3 or 4 hours and just completely fell in love with it. Finished it, and the next day I just played through it again. Like I loved it that much. It's a short game, but there is so much to do.
Can you just give a quick synopsis of what the game is, just in case people don't know exactly what it is?
So it's a colorful, isometric pixel art exploration game. You're on a small island, and you're a bird called Claire. Your aunt is a park ranger, and you're trying to get phone signal. That's the start of the game. Yeah. So the only place you can get phone signal to get an important call is on the top of Hawk Peak Mountain. And so you go out for a short hike, in inverted commas, on a sunny day, and you meet all of the people on the island, from hikers to rangers to there's a guy who's buying golden feathers that you need and then kind of selling them for more money at the start of the trail. Yeah. And there's all these funny characters. There's a goat who's lost his watch. There's a couple of kids that have started a climbing club. And so you get pulled into all of these little strands of story as you walk around the island. The dialogue reminds me of Night in the Woods a little bit. It's kind of snappy, kind of humorous, actually funny dialogue.
Yeah.
So it's got a lot of character. It's very colorful. You can, as you get your golden flowers, you can climb higher, golden feathers rather, and you can glide around the island. So it's a game that has a great sense of freedom too. Yeah. Like within a couple of hours, you can get to the top of the mountain. You can glide all the way down. There's loads to discover. And it's just such a colorful, lovely game. Good music, good art style, great dialogue. It's just a grade A game.
Yeah, and I think the thing I loved the most about it was the exploration, because it's relatively like a small game, but I feel like the way that they've framed it is so perfect that, you know, you might, if you follow the track, you're like the frame of what you're actually seeing is very like narrowed down to, okay, you're seeing the track and perhaps like a few characters around it. But then it's like if you wander off the track just ever so slightly, like the frame, you just see something that looks interesting, and it's kind of like, okay, what is that? And it's like, oh, maybe it's like a wall to climb, or maybe it's like a broken fence, or a derelict house or whatever, and it just makes you keep thinking, oh, what is that? And it just keeps you going and going. And I think that's kind of a lot of the point of the game as well, where I think there's a part where they're like, yeah, you can just go to track if you want to, like, and you'll get to the top of the mountain, but you know, you also given like the option to be like, well, no, actually, let's see what happens. And like for me, it was kind of, like I started, and then I met the guy that wants you to buy to find the 15 shells, and then the climbing club, and then it got to like a fork in the road, and it said like the peak left and the forest. I can't remember what the forest's called, but right. So I went to the forest, and then like my favorite story in it is when you meet the hare and the tortoise. And you know, the hare is really nervous because she's having a race and she's lost a lucky headband somewhere in the forest, and she asks you to go and find it. So then you go into the forest and you find a tortoise running who has a red headband on, and you get talking to him, and he's like, no, this is my headband, I don't know what you're talking about. And you tell her that, yeah, this hare was really excited for the race, and it turns out that the hare is racing the tortoise, and because the tortoise wants to make sure that the hare will run, the tortoise gives you the headband to give to the hare, and then you can go back to the hare and you can either be honest with her or lie to her. And I was honest and said, no, actually, this isn't your headband. It was from a tortoise. And then she's like really hyped because tortoise is like a really famous runner, and that if the tortoise believes in her, then she should believe in herself, kind of thing. And it's just very, very nice. And like I kind of hate this word now, but it's wholesome in a way. Because
it absolutely is. Yeah, it's like a proper comfort food game.
Yeah, and there's just like you said, there's so many little stories where you kind of bump into people and think, that was sweet, like that was cute. And the guys that create the new game where you have to hit the stick with the sticks, you hit the ball over the
beach stick ball.
Yeah, beach stick ball. Yeah, and like it's just like a joy, like to explore, like people. You know, usually when I check out games, I go to howlongtobeat.com. And it said like for a short hike an hour, but I just was also a bit like you, like there's still definitely a lot of stuff I missed, but it was kind of like, yeah, I enjoyed my journey to the top of the mountain. Like I don't know if I necessarily want to do it again, because I feel like, yeah, you know, I experienced it once, and I don't want to trail all over the map and look for everything. But the journey that I had, I really enjoyed.
Did you find the speedboat?
Yeah, because that's new, right?
Because
The speed
it
boat.
is. I was wandering around the game, and I mean, I've played it now 3 times, and every time that I pick it up, I find something new. So I was thinking, did I actually miss this speedboat the first time I played it? Because there's so many tucked away secrets in the game. There's still stuff that I haven't found. Like, you know, there's like a goat that needs his watch, and there's like some kind of there's all these kind of foot races that you can do to actually complete the game. So whilst you can do it in an hour if you want to, and you can get like a fun experience, it's the kind of game that you can just drop into now and then, take a little walk around, maybe pop up the mountain again and glide around a little bit. There's like an extra couple of islands dotted around out in the sea that you can go to.
Yeah.
And like, there's just so much to do and it has that, like, you know how you were saying how you took the walk and then you got drawn into these little stories.
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of like the kind of day the game is supposed to be when you go out for a wander and you end up meeting a mate and doing something and then, you know, going out for a picnic or whatever. And it's just kind of very summer day atmosphere. And it really imbues that in the player. It's just a really relaxing, lovely time.
Yeah, and I think it kind of tricks you a little bit as well, because the premise of the game is that Claire is looking to get a phone signal. So you think, oh yeah, you know, it's like a young teenager. She's in this beautiful wilderness, and all she wants to do is look on social media, and it kind of also makes you think like, okay, is that really why I'm walking to the top of this mountain? But I think the ending, when you actually find out why she gets there, like, I think is very, like, also very nice and very worth the payoff. And then, yeah, when you jump off at the end and can glide around the whole island, like, yeah, it's a really, really nice game.
Yeah, and I would say as well that, I mean, I actually got a little bit obsessed with this one. It's like a little gem to me, this game. So I went onto YouTube and looked up the developer, Adam Robinson Yu. He's Adam Gryu on Twitter. And there's actually a lecture that you can see, an hour-long lecture about how he designed the game, how he designed the island, and how they tested it and how they changed it to suit what the play testers were doing.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating if people are interested in how indie games are made. This one hour lecture on YouTube from Adam Yu is actually really an entertaining watch.
Yeah. Ah, cool. I didn't know that. I'll have to check that out. I'll also put that in the Discord, because I think there'll be a few people that are interested in that too. So yeah, so you definitely recommend a short hike to people, because it's also like really cheap. I think it's
incredibly cheap,
euros, €7 or €8.
Yeah, it's an absolute bargain. I mean, it's the kind of game where if you're like, if you're coming through an airport and you have to come through security and then wait and get on a plane and then wait, it's the kind of game that you could just pick up and play. It's not too stressful, it's easy going. Perfect game for a handheld device.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. So next up, I need you to explain it to me, because again, I believe you do a podcast episode about Manifold Garden before it came to the Switch as well.
I did. This is another game that I found during my searching for games of the year and indie games of the year, and like oddities, rarities, you know, just fun cult games.
Yeah.
And Manifold Garden came incredibly highly rated, but it was only available on Steam for PC and Apple Arcade. It was an Apple Arcade launch title. And that's because the director of the game, William, I think it's Chyr, Chyr, spent 4 years making this game. And he classifies himself as an artist rather than a game developer. And you can see that in the game. So I played it on Apple Arcade. I actually got Apple Arcade just to play this because I was so impatient. But again, it's another game that I'm very happy to have on Switch. I've played it to the end on Switch as well.
Yeah.
But the basic premise of the game is that you start in a room, flat colored walls and sharp light coming through the windows, very kind of architectural environment.
Yeah.
And the first lessons that you're taught are that you can walk up to a wall, hit R2, and then that wall will become the floor. So the world spins around you.
Yeah.
And there are cubes that you can pick up. Like if you pick up a red cube, it has to go on a red switch, but it will only be movable if you're standing on a red surface. Right. So it's these 3D puzzles with colored blocks and gravity shifting. Mm-hmm. But as you move through the game, it expands on that premise. So you come through these sort of modernist architectural spaces with sort of Piet Mondrian style windows.
Yeah.
Very, very artistic environments that are really striking visually, and they get more and more complicated. There are some parts that are very MC Escher-like. So you'll come into a space and it's a repeating fractal space. So you can fall through space and land where you jumped off from.
Yeah.
And so a lot of puzzles are about navigating these kind of complex wrapping environments, finding different colored cubes to open different doors in increasingly complex puzzles. But it's got a very psychedelic palette to it.
Yeah.
It's kind of this prismic, everything feels like that moment when sun turns into like lens flare. It's got that beautiful kind of lens flare palette with colors splitting off into prismic elements. And it's just a really fun, kind of artistic, slightly cerebral, but playable and enjoyable puzzle and exploration game.
Cool, yeah, because like I only really knew about it from you. Like I'd never heard of it before until either the podcast or when you were tweeting about it, and yeah, like I just saw the art style and the quick video when it was in the presentation, and yeah, I think it looks it looks like an artist made the game. I feel like it does look very artsy, and but yeah, I didn't necessarily know what it was about, but it does sound really interesting. Like it kind of like it kind of reminds me a bit of Portal, like, you know, you're moving the cubes around, and then you can also move through the space as you're moving like onto the different surfaces. So it sounds interesting.
Yeah, the big influences for this game are definitely Portal and The Witness.
Yeah.
The Witness, that's on Switch, I believe. I played it on a Mac, but it's a very open-ended puzzle game where you can wander an environment. And the guy who made The Witness, what's his name again? There's another YouTube video that you can watch of the guy that made The Witness playing through Manifold Garden.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it's two kind of very similar artistic game designing minds, and you get to see one interacting with the other's game. It's really enjoyable to watch.
What are the puzzles like in Manifold Garden? Because I never tried The Witness because I just thought it was a bit too much for me. Because I'm not like the biggest puzzle game fan. Like, you know, I don't want to have to get out a pen and paper and start jotting down like dates or times or like, you know, sketching images. Like, is it like a really hardcore puzzle game, Manifold Garden, or is it like logical enough that eventually you will be able to get through it?
It's definitely not as hardcore as The Witness, which is definitely like a very involved proposition. You have to learn symbol structures and how small symbols and interact with each other, and you have to hold it all in your mind. It's a difficult game. But Manifold Garden is a much more approachable game. Although it is ostensibly cube puzzles, the cube puzzles feel more like a breadcrumb trail that leads you through a series of really beautiful environments that are fun to experience in themselves. Yeah. So it's a puzzle game that kind of is closer to the walking simulator edge of the pool than the kind of deep, heavy Witness side of the pool. Yeah. It's approachable. Yeah. There are times when the puzzles get. I mean, my one criticism of the game, I reviewed it for Nintendo World Report. Sorry to plug your competitor there, but I took it down from. I mean, I was having a hard time scoring it because there's so much to love about Manifold Garden that in some respects it feels like a 10. Yeah. But then there are occasional puzzles where you feel like perhaps there's a couple steps too many. Okay. And so it gets a little bit like the spaces are really big. You're not quite sure where to go. Yeah. Yeah. And so there were a couple of moments where I felt lost, and I actually resorted to looking at a video of someone else playing it. And all the videos, the Let's Play videos that you can find of kind of puzzle game nerds and geniuses going through the game, they all got stuck at the same place as me. So,
really?
so I watched them stumble around for 5 minutes and find the solution, and then copied it. But there was only 2 places where I got stuck, and to be honest, it's 2 to 3 hour experience, and it's a wordless game. It's a storyless game. Yeah. And getting to the finale is worth the time. Okay. Yeah, it's got a really beautiful finale.
Do you know roughly like the price of it?
It's 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting. Yeah, I think just quickly, because it kind of reminds me, because I've been streaming the Last Campfire, which
Mm-hmm.
is also like a very interesting. It's a puzzle game, but it is more involved in story and kind of like the world that you're based in, and it's basically about that you are like this creature called an ember that is awoken in this world where everything seems to be not dying, but everyone is turning to stone, and the people that are turning to stone are called the Forlorn. And
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of like exploring this world, and as you explore through the first section, you find this campfire, and you light the campfire, and the spirit rises from the fire and basically tells you, okay, all of these other embers are becoming forlorn, like they're kind of losing hope in the world, and that you are then tasked with kind of like finding them. And it reminds me, if
Mm-hmm.
you ever played, the original Spyro the Dragon, where you're running around and you can see the dragon statues and you bump into them. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like that. Like you're kind of exploring the world, and there are kind of puzzles within the world that you have to complete that will open up like a section of an area that you previously couldn't get to, and then within that area there'll be a forlorn.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you actually get to the forlorn, it's kind of like a very specific, almost like a Breath of the Wild shrine type puzzle, where you are then you're in the world and you get to the forlorn, and then you kind of the camera zooms in, and then as it zooms back out, you're inside this like puzzle dungeon sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all very, because like I said, I'm not really a puzzle game fan. Like I usually don't have the patience, but I like playing them on stream because it means I can't resort to YouTube in it, because then I'd be too embarrassed to do it on stream. Be like, oh, I can't, I don't know. I'm just gonna Google the answer now. And it's also nice to do it with chat, because then hopefully chat can nudge you in the right direction.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I felt like the puzzles were very kind of, they were very relaxing. Like it didn't take too much thought to do them. Apart from like the very end, there's these puzzles where you were moving like a snake around that has 3 sections, and on the floor there are kind of tiles that you have to get the snake exactly on to open a
Mm-hmm.
door. And like, oh my god, I thought my head was going to explode, because you're having to
Yep.
move around all of this stuff and get the snake to go in the right direction and stuff. But yeah, but other than that, like the game is, again, I think it's a very very you game, John. It's very, you were kind of just wandering around, and it's very metaphorical. I think like I feel like everyone probably takes their own kind of morals away from it, but like for me, I think it's a game about depression, and that that a lot of the time these forlorn is saying that they've given up hope, but when you find them and you kind of, I don't know how to say it, but how you kind of find them and give them attention, and as they come
Mm-hmm.
back, they're like, okay, yeah, I was asleep for a long time, but now I'm like starting to feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you play, like the more I really enjoyed it, until like I beat it on stream, and the ending is very touching and really
Mm-hmm.
really nice. And yeah, it's also made by Hello Games, so the guys that
Yeah.
made No Man's Sky. So that's another
Yeah.
game I'd really put down as like a very chilled experience. Nice puzzles that are also quite accessible, and it has a really nice story. And the narrator is she has this very soft Welsh accent, and the way she narrates is just so almost like picture book like, as if she's reading you a story, and doing like these silly voices for the bad guys and stuff like that. Really
Mm-hmm.
nice, really nice game.
Yeah. I love games like that. I mean, um, game mechanics alongside another vision. Like
Yeah,
in Manifold Garden, it's about moving through beautiful spaces and bending the rules of gravity and time. And the puzzle game mechanics are there to kind of give you that experience, to give you like a breadcrumb trail to move through the game.
yeah,
And I like games that, like you say, have a really strong narrative. And the way that it moves you through that narrative is just to give you small tasks to keep you
yeah,
playing,
exactly.
but it's
Yeah,
delivering a story at the same time. I like that kind of sensitive game design.
yeah,
And in Manifold Garden, it's like you have to get these cubes and combine them into a rainbow cube. When you do that, nature returns to these
mm,
architectural environments. So there's like 6 or so levels, and as you complete them and you plug in that final cube, like a world of nature kind of returns to these kind of quite sterile spaces. And so again, it's like you could read it as being about bringing nature back into society or something like
mm,
that. You could kind of take your own it's a wordless game, but you can take your own vision of what it's
Yeah.
about away. A little bit
Yeah.
like the Last Campfire, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a game that I feel like I've been thinking about a lot after beating it. It wasn't like, okay, that's the end, roll credits, next game. I was like, like thinking about it a lot, and like, yeah, it is a very touching game and a very, I would say, like, specifically designed, and the narrative is very specifically written so that you are kind of taking away like what actually happened, because you never find out why these people are turned to stone. It's just that the game says that they've lost hope, and it's not necessarily clear like if there's a monster in the world that's turning them to stone, or if I don't know, something in the environment is doing it, or if they are getting, you know, if they're getting old and leaving the world that way. But yeah, I think it's very like open-ended to where you can draw your own conclusions, and a really nice game.
I like a game that has a bit of poetry in it, and that sounds like one for me.
So next up, you were playing Road to Guangdong, I believe. Which,
Road to Guangdong.
Yeah, I was contacted on Twitter by the developers. They asked if I would like a code, and I thought, again, I was like, this is a John game. So then I asked you if you would like a code, and you said yes, and then we got you the code, and you seem to have played it like in one sitting, or near enough one sitting.
Yeah, you sent me the code in the morning, and I downloaded it, left it on the Switch, and I picked up the Switch after dinner time, and then I think from 8 o'clock through to midnight, I just played the whole game.
Nice.
I'd had my eye on it, so I was happy when you got in touch about it.
Okay.
And I love that John game is a thing now. I really appreciate that, because it means that when indie games that have that kind of edge to them cross your desk, I'm really happy that they're going to come my way.
Yeah.
No, but Road to Guangdong is it's an interesting one. It's two types of game in one. It's a rudimentary driving game and a visual novel. So the premise is you're a girl called Sunny who comes back to her family home in Guangdong in China because her parents have died in a car crash, and she's surprised to find that she has inherited the family restaurant. So she's greeted by her aunt, Grace, who is referred to as Guma, which is Chinese for aunt throughout the game. And she also inherits a car. And so they decide to go on a road trip around China to contact relatives, to fill them in on what's happened, to greet them, commiserate with them, and to get some family recipes that they can take back to the restaurant. And so what happens is, like, the car is called Sandy, and it's a real hunk of junk. Like, you can, from the outside, when you're parked, you can open the bonnet and you can take out the air filter, take out the oil filter.
Yeah.
You can check the tires, and then you get in. It's first person, very rudimentary. So it's like stop and go.
Yeah.
And you drive through the countryside or through the city, through this kind of quite nice, brightly colored, quite stylized environment, specific to China. So you'll see like Chinese characters on the shops and things like that. It's an A to B driving game. So all you have to do is not go too fast because the car will break down.
Yeah.
And you have to fill it up with gas constantly. So you're minding the gas, pulling over at gas stations, changing the tires. And then eventually you get to point B. And that's where there's like a short story section. So say that you arrive at your cousin's farm. You talk to your 4 cousins. You say, is there anything I can do to help you out? And they say, can you mind your cousin, this little girl, while we go about our business on the farm?
Yeah.
So you have to look after this girl while they do their stuff. And if they're happy with you, then they give you a recipe at the end. You invite them to a family reunion, and then you drive off to the next stop.
Uh-huh.
There are 5 stops in total with different relatives, like a grandpa who's having trouble with his dojo, and an old relative who has received a mysterious letter in English that needs it translated to Chinese, and that contains some important family news.
Yeah.
So you can fail these scenarios. Like if you choose dialogue options, when you're in the visual novel part, it flips to a visual novel style. So it's like you can see yourself, you can see the different people, choose who you talk to, choose dialogue, and then you get different outcomes based on that. I passed 4 of the 5 encounters. I actually pissed off the farmers because the little girl wanted to keep her chicken that they'd asked me to slaughter for dinner. And I did it. I kept the chicken for the little girl.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, you shouldn't have lied to us," and they didn't come to the reunion.
Oh no!
but every other family member was happy with me.
Yeah.
And so they all turned up. And so it's a 5-hour experience, mixture of driving game. You can kind of change the radio station while you're driving.
Yeah.
There's one modern music station that has like a kind of a track that sounds like the Prodigy and a track that sounds like the 1975 or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's a traditional music station, which your aunt obviously prefers.
Yeah.
And it has these beautiful traditional Chinese music compositions. So as you're cruising through the countryside, listening to the radio, occasionally your aunt will chat to you. You're watching the petrol. It's very mellow.
Yeah.
It's not challenging, really. It's just like a kind of simple resource management and visual novel. And I found it to be like just a really nice combination of good writing, good music, nice art style, an authentic feeling scenario and game world. Because it really gives you a feeling of Chinese culture and Chinese families through the conversations and through the kind of the encounters that you have.
Yeah.
And so over those 5 hours, I felt like I'd learned about Chinese culture and family a little bit and just had a really nice, mellow time.
Yeah, because I listened to your podcast episode about it today, and you said like, you know, you were learning like Chinese words for the family, like for their mama and baba and yeah, like you said, for the auntie and stuff. And I think it's kind of, it's nice to see these indie games from other parts of the world coming through, because like another one that I wanted to talk about, like Takeshi and Hiroshi, like a Japanese indie game. Like it definitely is nice to see these different aspects that are based in different like realistic parts of the world. And yeah, the reason I thought this was a John game because it reminded me of that camping game that you reviewed. What was that called?
Camping game. I mean, I played Firewatch recently.
No, it was the one where you there's like the couple, and then you're like there's the two kids.
Yeah.
What was it
Wide Ocean, Big Jacket.
Yeah, that, and that's why I thought you'd enjoy it, because it really reminded me of that kind of like a real story based in like a real setting that has some gameplay to it, but is mostly about the characters and about the story and the environments they're set in. So
exactly, it's like an interactive story, and I'm quite into the visual novel genre. Like I've enjoyed learning about it, like playing Firewatch, playing What Became of Edith Finch, and these kind of walking sim games that delivers you a story via gameplay along with a beautiful environment.
Yeah.
And whilst Road to Guangdong isn't quite in the same league as those top quality like BAFTA winning titles, it's definitely, you know, it's influenced by them. And if you're a fan of those games, I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's written by a Chinese woman who is, I followed her on Twitter. She's studying game design in London.
Yeah.
And she's studying how to put Chinese culture and game design together as a writer. And so I'm very interested to see what the future holds from her as well, because like you say, we spend so much time playing westernized environments. It's just really beautiful, like a breath of fresh air to get different cultural inputs into games.
Yeah. And talking about like different inputs, like I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about Takeshi and Hiroshi, because that was another game that was announced during the Indie World presentation. Another one that I believe was on Apple Arcade first, and it's also kind of a short, I guess you could call it a visual novel as well, because most of the story is just delivered to you via cutscenes with a little bit of gameplay. So yeah, do you want to give like a quick synopsis of the game?
Yeah, this one is quite a curious one too. It's I mean, I think that this Indie World Direct that we had was just the absolute best. I mean, all of the games just seem wonderful. I really want to play Raji as well.
Yeah, and Spiritfarer.
Yeah, and what was the other one? The Hades.
Yeah,
it was just like wall-to-wall hits, really.
Yeah,
every game seems interesting from that Indie Direct.
Honestly, you want to play Hades? Oof, that's a roguelike.
I'll give it a try if it was in the company of these games.
That's it. I think Hades is one of the now like the highest echelon of roguelikes. Like they worked on it and now I think it has like a lot of lore to it, and you know, with the Greek gods, but I also think mechanically it's really, really good too. So I think if you're going to try one, you should
jump in the deep end. Yeah, jump in the deep end and just go for it.
Yeah.
But Takeshi and Hiroshi is like a short 2-hour narrative experience in which two brothers, one of whom is a teenager and one of whom is a child, are represented by kind of almost Lego-like graphical presences.
Yeah, I looked into it a little bit. It's called puppetooning, I think it's called. So it's like it's stop motion, like that they are cartoon puppets that they actually do animate by frame. And I think the closest thing I could relate it to was if you ever watched Robot Chicken, which was like a show on Cartoon Network back in the day, where they also did it with action figures, where they do it like kind of like stop motion. And it's apparently the official term is puppetooning.
Okay, that's cool. I didn't know that, but it does have a handmade feel to it, and that's actually quite interesting because it relates to the gameplay too.
Yeah.
The older brother is making a game for the younger brother who is sick, but the problem is that he is very early in the process of becoming a game developer, and so he can't make full games, but he does want to impress his younger brother, and so he sets up a system where the younger brother can play the game. He'll pretend that he's doing his homework, but he's actually controlling the game that the brother is playing.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit harder to explain than it is to play, but basically, what's the game called again? It's called Brave Knight or something?
Yeah, something
generic.
Yeah, it is a very generic. That's why I always forget it. Or it's something like Majestic Warrior or something, or
yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
And basically, your younger brother is coming through the game and he's swiping his sword, and you have to curate the enemies that come at him to create just the right amount of difficulty to get him excited.
Yeah.
But not too hard, because then he'll be sad. Not too easy, because then he'll be bored. And so you have to pick out these enemies, like this one's a purple jelly, this one's a skeleton. You have to kind of know what level he's at and just pitch the game just right for him. And then between these levels, like when your younger brother is happy and he finishes a level, you get a little package of story. Like maybe you go and visit him in the hospital, maybe you go to school and talk about it with your friends. And then you come back with a new idea for a new baddie.
Yeah.
And play another level of the game. And it's actually just a very kind of touching story. The gameplay itself is very light. It's not that involved.
No.
I found sometimes that when you were throwing down the right curation of enemies to finish the level, there would be some random thing that happened that meant you had to do it again. Like he missed one time, or one enemy hit harder than you thought. And I was like rolled my eyes a little bit, and I had to play a couple of the levels like 3 or 4 times to get through them.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel entirely skill based, but honestly, it's such a short, light game that it's worth playing through for the narrative. It was an enjoyable time. I think it's well priced.
Yeah.
It's not like a must play, but it's definitely like a fun little indie game if you want something to kill a couple of hours and to experience someone's ideas.
Yeah, that's how I'd explain it too. Like, I actually reviewed it for the site, and I think I gave it a 6. And for me, I was kind of most impressed by the animation, because I love like these figures that they made and how well it is animated. And yeah, the story it is kind of like you said, like it's a very like a touching story where he starts out wanting to impress his brother, and then when his brother gets sick, he kind of is making the game to try and teach his brother to be like a fighter and to fight through this sickness. And he kind of like comes together with his arch nemesis, who is a better programmer than he is, and they make this game together. But yeah, I'd also totally agree with the randomness. Like for me, it was more the randomness of the pool of enemies that you got. Like, because every time you started a new round in the fight, you would get a pool of 9 enemies that you could choose from. And especially at the end of the game, if you get a bad roll and get like 7 really hard enemies, then
you're going to kick your younger brother's ass by accident.
Yeah, exactly. You're just screwed. And each fight has about 5 different, say like this, each battle has like 5 fights in it. And once you beat the first 2 fights, you then get a checkpoint. And then if it's too boring, or if you kill your brother's character, then you get sent back to the checkpoint. But in the last fight, it was really like his fun meter wasn't high enough by the first 2 fights. So then I was just trying to give him the hardest enemies to fight against to get his fun meter up. But then the enemies were too hard, so he would keep dying. So I had to like kind of do like a save, kind of reload and then try it again, and then the second time I managed it. But yeah, it's definitely comes down to luck, which enemies you get and how powerful they are.
Yeah, and I mean the fun thing about it is that it's a game about making a quite basic game, and it is a quite basic game.
Yeah.
So it has like an interesting little kind of parallel there between this kind of in-game world game designer, and then you're playing, a game that someone's made too. So it's kind of
exactly. But
childlike.
It's like you said, it's not a game that you have to go out and buy straight away. But that's it. If you've got 2 hours to spare and you're looking for something like that at least looks really impressive, the animation side, and does have like a bit of gameplay to it, I'd also say go and check out Takeshi and Hiroshi.
Yeah, I love that you can just spend like $20 or $30 on some of the games that we're talking about.
Yeah,
like you could probably get Manifold Garden, Short Hike, and Takeshi and Hiroshi for £30 or so.
Yeah,
and that's 3 quite brilliant, quite creative games that you can that aren't going to kind of swallow up 90 hours of your time.
Yeah.
They're just discrete artistic experiences, and you can have those 3 games for not that much money. And that's the way that I love playing games, actually, is just to have like when things are on sale, I kind of stockpile them. So I've usually got like 10 or 20 games in my Switch.
Yeah.
And based on mood or based on how much time I have, there's always the right kind of game is there, So they're great games to put in the Switch, just save them for a rainy day. The time will be right and you will have fun with them.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about, because I feel like you've at least in kind of our sphere of like Switch and gamers, you've kind of made yourself out to be like like I said, like I always feel like I know what a John game is, usually because it's short and it's narrative based and it has some type of unique sounding story or possibly like a very like indie aspect to it. Like how did you get into these games? Like you said you kind of took a year off from gaming. Why did you then search out kind of these shorter indie games instead of being like, okay, I need to play God of War and I need to play Spider-Man, what led you down like the indie path rather than AAA?
Well, I have played quite a few AAAs as well, actually. I mean, what happened with me was I left London in 2013 to move to Iceland.
Yeah.
And I sold my whole life, basically. So I sold my 2000 CD collection, sold like 6 or 7 consoles.
Yeah.
With like 50, 60, 70 games or whatever.
Yeah.
Sold everything I had, my guitar, moved with 2 cases. And then I just got very busy with work and didn't ever repurchase a console. But what happened with me was that I suffer from some quite serious anxiety. And I had like a kind of a big problem period last year where I had to drop out of work and stuff and was having a really hard time. But a friend of mine had shown me Breath of the Wild.
Yeah. And
so I thought, if I'm going to be stuck at home with this anxiety and agoraphobia and all this stuff, I think gaming could be just the ticket. So I picked up a Switch, got Breath of the Wild, and found that playing that game, moving through that beautifully rendered natural environment and that kind of soft story and that sense of kind of freedom within a game world was a great way to get out of my own head and to reduce anxiety and just really kind of put my attention into something else. And so after I finished Breath of the Wild, I started looking into other games, because when you finish a big game like that, it's like when you finish reading Lord of the Rings or something, you just feel like there's a hole in your life.
Yeah,
exactly. So I thought, what am I going to fill it with? And so I bought like Firewatch, I bought Hollow Knight, I sort of did my research and filled my Switch with games. And I realized that what works for me is to have a big game on the go. If you want to sit down in front of the telly, or if you want to kind of spend a good few hours on a session, but then also to have a lot of short games as options, different moods, like maybe something that's more kind of active, something that's just a really simple walking simulator with not much commitment. And so I really just started kind of combing the lists of games of the year, seeing what came out on Switch, and got very interested in because indie games weren't really a thing, when I was last a gamer.
Yeah, in 2013 or whenever.
I'd kind of missed the whole indie game revolution. And so, I mean, I've been going back through it, and I've played games like Thomas Was Alone.
Yeah.
Like formative indie game that I think would have a wonderful home on Switch, but isn't there now.
Yeah.
And so the reason that I like playing perhaps what you call John games is partially because I come from an art background. And so I'm kind of curious about what can be done with this medium of games. Like, what elements can you take out? What can you put in? How strong of a kind of a narrative or an art influence can you have? Like in Manifold Garden, it's architecture. In Kentucky Route Zero, it's narrative and art. There's like in-game concerts, in-game exhibitions, and so it's really, games to me are like a meeting point between many disciplines. And I love seeing the way that different people use that. And so games like Edith Finch, Firewatch, all the games we've talked about today, Manifold Garden, Road to Guangdong, they're very creative, expressive experiences that kind of shake off the kind of the dogma of gaming, if you know what I mean. Like, you're not like collecting power crystals, and you're not like jumping on walls and shooting zombies in the head. You know, it's like a more kind of, I feel that as gamers have grown up, gaming has grown up too. And so developers have grown up too. And so you're getting games like Gone Home. You're getting games like, you know, Edith Finch. You're getting these kind of slightly more kind of lofty or kind of developed original game experiences that aren't all about kind of Twitch reflexes. And so I'm very interested in gaming minimalism. I've become interested in gaming game design minimalism. How much you can kind of take out of a game and what decisions you make about what elements to put in. So all of these games that have narrative styles and art styles are fascinating to me, basically.
Me too. Like, that's kind of why I started like an indie game website, because I feel like the Switch was on such like a high with indie games that I was kind of thinking that this is only going to keep going and keep getting higher, and more games are going to come out. And that's it. It's kind of, it is nice to see, like, you know, older games or ports of games that have been on different consoles come over to the Switch, but it's also kind of cool to see something totally new and totally different come on, and like kind of like the Last Campfire. Like, I know it got released on the other systems, but it was like a new game from a studio that you wouldn't really expect to make a game like that. But you can kind of also tell it when you play the game that it was like a passion project for someone in that studio, and someone must have fought really hard to be like, okay, I really want to make this game. I know that we have No Man's Sky, and that's like been, you know, now it's a big success. But they must have been like, yeah, I want to make this. I need a small team. I need like a time frame, and this is the game what I want to make. And it feels very, very indie, like how the game looks, at least on the Switch, and how it performs on the Switch. It's very indie, if you know what I mean, because there are some performance issues with it. But I just love that you can tell someone must have really wanted to make this game, because otherwise, like, Hello Games doesn't need to make like a small 6-hour long indie game. And that's kind of the thing that I love about it, is that you see people's passion so much in indie games. And, you know, when it comes down to, you know, like Adam Robinson, like, you know, one guy's vision for a game, and this game ends up then being like the biggest game or one of the biggest games of the year when it comes out, and then for the next 2 years or 3 years after it, people are still talking about it, and that's kind of the really cool side of indie games. But
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that outside of things like Itch, which are like truly democratic, like an indie game forum where like half-finished experiments and, you know, like games that come out of game jams and Unity experiments and things like that are on Itch. But outside of that, the Switch has really become the console home of indie gaming. Like Nintendo's focus on, I think they learned the lessons of the Wii U and kind of sealing developers out of their systems. And so they've actually kind of rolled out the red carpet for indie gamers to get a lot of content onto their system. And as a result, and especially because of the indie games being smaller in nature, it's not like you're going to stick these games on a 4K TV and have like a big surround sound system to play a short hike. You know, it belongs on a console like this. And so indie games kind of, and Switch just have clicked together in such an interesting way. And I think that most indie developers now are thinking about how can I get my game onto Switch before the other consoles even.
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's a few that I know who have games out on Steam, and the next step for them is the Switch. So, and it's like you say, Nintendo seem to be a lot more open about it than they were. Even I feel like even at the start of the Switch's life cycle. They were still quite close when you were talking to people, but now they seem to be a bit more like, okay, yeah, they're willing to send out more dev kits and stuff like that.
Right, and I mean, a few games that have come out, like, I'm sure that no one was expecting Hollow Knight to sell 3 million copies or whatever it's sold now.
Yeah.
And like when Nintendo is seeing these games on their, in the charts, competing with games like Zelda and things like that in terms of sales, like they're realizing that their audience wants more of it.
Exactly.
And so these Indie World Directs are a real step in the right direction. Nintendo have kind of stumbled onto a winning formula here, a handheld console with small scale games that just fit the kind of time you're going to have with the handheld console,
Yeah.
It's just a formula that works.
Yeah, that's true. So good, John. So speaking of more indie games, you yourself have an indie game podcast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your Gaming in the Wild podcast and where people can find it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I started, I'm a journalist by trade. And so whilst I've had my kind of sick leave that I was talking about, I've kind of played so many games, and my instinct is always to express myself about whatever I'm doing. It's like it's like a chronic problem.
Yeah.
And so whilst I've been away from journalism, I thought I need to talk about games. I need to get my opinion out there and have my kind of 2 cents worth about what these games are.
Yeah.
And so I started the podcast as a kind of I started off doing 10-minute shows, spoiler-free 10-minute show that just talks about an interesting game.
Yeah.
But I kind of have ended up now doing shows that talk about 2 or 3 games. They're very scattershot. It goes all the way from AAA titles through to just small new indies, through to classic indies. And the kind of the elevator pitch for the show is that it's about like my journey through reacquainting myself with the years of games that I missed whilst I was away from gaming.
Yeah.
But I've had a focus on games that I consider to be creative or artistic in some way, like all the games that we've talked about today. And so I think that there is like a little kind of atmosphere to the show and a little niche to it. I've had some really lovely feedback about it, and I'm really enjoying doing it. It's called Gaming in the Wild. People can find me on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Instagram. The podcast comes out weekly on a Friday, and it's available on Apple Podcasts, Google, all of those places.
Yeah.
So if anyone's interested in it, you can find me on Twitter. There's I post out the links when new shows go up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love it. Like I listen to it regularly, and I really like how you mix in music from the games into the podcast, and it's just such like I just think it's very you. Like even listening to it, it just makes me feel chilled out, and I also feel like you do experiment a lot with different indie games. Like I can't remember the name of the one you were talking about, but the one you said you got in the itch bundle, and you just randomly clicked on it and were like, yeah, this is interesting, and it's kind of it kind of puts pings in my head for that I'll have to watch out for that when it comes to Switch kind of thing. So I think it's kind of like nice, like, getting the tip of the hat before these games come to Switch from you and your podcast. So yeah, I highly suggest it. I listen to it on Spotify, so it's on Spotify too if you're a Spotify user. And
and I will also say that like I've kind of investigated what's out there in terms of games media. Like there's a certain sort of house style that comes with a lot of games podcasts and YouTubes, which is like high energy, fast talking, like bam, 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 and a little bit kind of like energy drinks and like tempo and energy. And I actually like to listen to things that are mellow, that have a kind of a conversational pace to them. And so I kind of make the podcast that way on purpose.
Yeah.
Luckily for me, most of the games that I cover have wonderful music, so I use that to set the tone. Try and keep I don't edit out all the spaces of when I'm talking,
Yeah.
So it has like it should be like even friends that aren't into gaming have listened to it and said that they found it to be a mellow listen. And so that's the goal really. It's to make a kind of
it's a bit like a fireside chat.
Exactly.
You put it on and you hear it. It is kind of like, I don't know if you make notes or you have a script, but it does feel very like you have all these thoughts in your head and you're just listing them and it's like you said, the games are very like from all different genres and platforms, but I also feel like most of the time the podcast does have like a theme running through it, which I think is also kind of nice and clever how it works out. So yeah, I highly recommend the podcast. And you also, are you still streaming? I've not been really paying much attention to Twitch the last couple of weeks, but are you still doing the streams on Twitch?
Yeah, I stream from PS4 because the PS4 is just so well set up for streaming.
Yeah.
And I've got like a PS cam, so you can just hit share and it works perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to switch to stream from Switch.
Trying to switch the Switch.
Trying to switch on my Switch and get switched, but unfortunately my old dual core Mac isn't really up to it. I've had a couple of successful Switch streams with games like Mutaze Oni, really good indie game. But for the most part, I'm streaming PS4 at the moment until I upgrade my computer. Anyone who streams knows that like getting your Streamlabs settings right is like having the planets align above you.
Yeah, I'm still too scared to try OBS in Streamlabs. I'm still using the Twitch Studio beta because it's pretty like dumb proof, you know. It's also usually you just turn it on and it works and everything's fine, but it is very limited to what you actually can use on there. Like I actually looked today, I was really surprised because now they actually have a chat tab, so I can get chat up on the screen now, which I'm really excited about. But before, like, there was nothing like that. It was very, very basic, but yeah, it does the job.
How have you found streaming? Have you been enjoying it?
I do. I really enjoy it. It's like I've always wanted to do it, and I was kind of in the same situation as you. I had an older MacBook that just wasn't powerful enough to do it. And then my girlfriend, she has like a work PC from like her old job, which she doesn't use anymore, and it happens to have been like modded out. Like when you look at it, you just think it looks like a black brick, but inside it had like an Intel Core i7, and it's actually quite powerful. Yeah, so that's what I've been using. But it's kind of like I said to you before the show. I've got everything all over the place. I have all my graphics on my Mac, and then the streaming stuff on the laptop, and yeah, it's just like, and then I'm also so like setting my setup up, and then I have to tidy it all away every time I stream. So that's kind of like a thing of like, okay, now I have to get it all out and then put it all away.
Yeah.
But I do really love it.
Struggle is real.
Yeah, exactly. But I do really love it. Like I love just interacting with people, and it also gives me a chance, an excuse to play games, because usually, you know, I run a gaming podcast, but most of my week I'm not playing games because I just don't have the time, or you know, sometimes I'm just not in the mood to do it. So I'm like, okay, these 3 hours a week, I get to stream and just play something. And yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and it's also nice to do the podcast live because it's nice to have people in the chat if they ever have questions or whatever. So no, I really like streaming. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I've had a good time with it. I started off streaming No Man's Sky, which has like this kind of very ambient, generative soundtrack.
Yeah.
So it's actually like a mellow listen. And I think just playing that game and kind of exploring, scanning plants and planet hopping was a really nice way to do it, because you can just play for 2 or 3 hours, just chat gently with whoever shows up and kind of enjoy your game in a kind of a social way. So, I mean, and I've gotten into watching a lot of streamers as well. I like watching your streams.
Yeah.
Like watching like Girl with Box, who I think is in the chat now.
Yeah, she just followed, so thanks for the follow, Girl with Box.
She's a great streamer. Curls Burgers, another great streamer. And Clover, EXE. So I've really enjoyed kind of finding streaming personalities and voices that I like, and kind of dabbling in streaming myself. It's a really fun social kind of expansion of gaming.
It is, yeah, it is. Good. So then I think, John, we will round off the episode here. Like I always say, the episode will be going up on podcast services, pretty much wherever you listen to a podcast. That's where it should go up after the show. It will also go up on YouTube. John, do you just want to mention again where people can find you if they're interested in hearing the podcast and watching you stream?
Yeah, you can find the podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, all of the major podcast platforms, Breaker, Overcast, Gaming in the Wild. Yeah. You can also find me on Twitter, YouTube. I have a YouTube channel where I upload the show with visuals if you want to see the game while you hear me talk about it.
Yeah.
So Gaming in the Wild on all social media and Twitch and podcast platforms. I spend most of my time on Twitter. I'm always happy to talk games, to hear from people, take recommendations. If you've got an idea for a John game, then please shoot it my way on Twitter. And that's it.
Good. So thank you very much for listening, and also John's also a reviewer for Switch Indie Fix. His latest review was A Short Hike, and he's also just finished off the review for Road to Guangdong. So that will be going up soon on the website too, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. But until next time, guys, thanks for hanging out in the chat, and thanks for listening to the podcast, and we'll all see you all next time. Bye-bye.
And thanks for having me, Adam. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye.